Hey everybody, Ty here. I hope everyone's doing well. Hopefully everyone has had a good weekend so far. And I hope, of course, that would continue. Obviously, we're coming in with another weather forecast, and this time we're putting our focus over the lower 48 because, as of right now, things have been pretty slow. And at least over the course of this next week, I would expect that to continue. But really, we're going to be putting a lot more focus into the medium to long range here because I'm starting to see a more notable signal for a big pattern shift, one that might throw even the monthly outlook that we put up maybe a few days ago into awry here. So definitely want to be paying attention towards the middle part of this video particularly. But of course right now we have to go with what we have in front of us, and we'll start with today's marginal risk right here for severe weather. Not really a whole lot to write home about. It's mainly over parts of Kansas and Nebraska here. The main threat is an isolated damaging wind and hail threat. Tornado threat is pretty much a non-zero, but we have had some days where we've had a couple sneaky little storms try to produce a quick spin up, so nothing can really be ruled out, but I would find it to be rather unlikely today. So not much to really be concerned with. On days 2 and 3, there is currently a non-severe risk, or a non-zero severe risk, as I call it, just like with the tornado threat. Easily a storm could end up pulsing severe. We could easily see a warning through the day in at least one of these areas where thunderstorms are possible, but the likelihood, of course, just like with the tornado threat today, rather low. So we go through days 4 through 8 here from the Storm Prediction Center. On days 7 and 8, we have predictability to low tags. So that's a little bit of your signal, your little heads up here that we're going to start to see a bit of a change begin to occur as we get towards the middle of the month. I kind of been talking about this a little bit in the monthly outlook that we put up a few days prior. So it's good to see that we are finding a decent signal. Of course, one thing about when I do those monthly outlooks, I only have one model to look at the time that's really reliable to me, in my opinion. And whenever we end up using said model and things go awry or they kind of flop, it's a little bit frustrating. So it's good to have some decent confidence in said signals. GFS is kind of moving on its own already, but if we go ahead and add the euro into the picture here, one thing that you'll notice is right around the same time frame, right around the 11th and onward, we start to see a massive increase in activity over here as a whole. And towards the end of the model run, and I don't like to really talk about anything that's about 300 plus hours out, but to see the level of model congruency that I see between the GFS and the Euro, which are honestly two of the most reliable models, does lead me to have some intrigue with the setup that we could have in play here. Now, breaking down the details with this, and it's like I said, it's really towards the end of the run that really piques my interest, so to speak. I want you to watch this first trough come in. This is going to be impacting the northwest. Another trough builds up over here towards the southeast, increases rainfall chances. Then we start to see a case of maybe a trough ejection coming into play. I'm actually going to take this out of loop here so that way you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So here's that trough over towards the southeast that develops. Anything that develops out towards the Atlantic right now is, of course, some people may know that we have another future invest to watch. This trough's going to keep that out to sea, so nothing to be concerned with there. But what I want you to pay attention to is watch this other trough that forms up over here just off the southwest coast here. See another trough that comes in, breaks off ahead of this. So this is a cutoff area right here. New trough comes in, kicks this one out. And the reason I make significance of that is because of two words: potentially a trough ejection. Now again, 300 hours out, not a lot of room to have confidence considering the fact that this run could be gone within the next day or two, and we're looking almost 2 weeks in advance at this point. But if this scenario comes into play, there could be a window of opportunity for severe weather. Where that ends up setting up is still yet to be seen. Anywhere along the northeast really looks like the point of interest if we can get strong enough forcing and other parameters to come into play. If this trough can continue to increase to go along with that, we might have something here. But like I said, it's so hard to really forecast anything like this at this range, but there are some signals that do need to be watched. And if you look on the euro here, if we were to go ahead and actually move this forward as well, you see a pretty similar scenario beginning to occur. It's a little bit faster progression with the euro at this point, and the trough is a little bit further out to sea, but it still gets kicked out nonetheless here. But with that outcome, though, the threat would shift a little bit further off towards maybe the Midwestern states, maybe the Ohio Valley as well. Both of these setups look rather intriguing and kind of impressive, if I were to say so myself. This is a pretty solid fall setup, but again, I can't really latch onto it due to the time frame that we're at still. So definitely need to pay very close attention to that. We go ahead and even shift this down towards the 700 millibar height, which is the mid-level of the atmosphere. As we were just looking at the upper level, you see a pretty similar signal here. So it, like I said, it does lead me to have a slight increase in confidence despite the time frame that we're looking at. I'm really intrigued to see what happens with these signals over these next few days, especially over the rest of the week, because if that continues, we might have something here. But in regards to that, one thing that I would expect either way is for an increase in shower and storm activity over towards the deep south. I don't know how significantly that will increase our rain chances. I do think we'll see a considerable increase in comparison to what we've had here. And over here towards the deep south particularly, that's needed because we're starting to get into a little bit of a drought situation there. We go out towards the northwest also. I do think we're going to start to see an increase in maybe some winter weather as well. I do expect a cold air mass to kind of push in from the northwest and drop south, and as a result, with any moisture that we could get to meet up in those higher elevations, that's when we'll start to get some more considerable mountain snow with that. Now, one other thing that I'm interested in, of course, is the desert southwest. Expected to be drier than average this month, but we do have a couple signals that lean into maybe a little bit of a boost in moisture, maybe even a tropical entity maybe coming into play. Now, obviously, it's very touch and go, especially for this region here, but any amount of moisture along with those mountains can increase shower and thunderstorm activity as well. So, monsoon may not be done over here either. So, a lot to really pay attention to there. We're going to go ahead and take a look at our temperatures for the week ahead and really beyond that point. Another thing we're going to notice with those troughs, and this was the part I was getting at where we could have the whole entire monthly outlook go awry, is with those troughs, obviously cold air is going to be introduced. We saw a pretty big one come in towards the end of that model run. That, combined with the wind pattern that I'm seeing here as well at the surface, does lead me to have some suspicion in the long range. Now watch this. You see these reds right here, we're in 70s and 80s. Towards the end of the week, look at how we're starting to get into those greens. We're getting some 30s, even some 40s mixing in here. Now those are most likely going to be our low temperatures, not necessarily our high temperatures. So don't worry, you're probably still going to have a normal day, but it is going to feel considerably different if the scenario again plays out. 300 hours out, it's not a lot to latch onto, but we will start to feel more fall-like days here potentially in the weeks ahead. So for anyone that's concerned that, oh no, it's going to feel like summer, might want to pump the brakes on that, honestly. And if I'm being honest, I'm kind of relieved due to the fact that I work outside, and it has been pretty warm this season. I was looking forward to a slightly cooler month ahead. I went a little too early with or gave up a little too early on the wind map here. But in any case, one thing that we'll also be noticing is we're going to see a little bit of an increase from winds to the north as well for a lot of the central U.S. Towards the deep south, I would be watchful of onshore flow, especially over towards Florida. And this is what's also going to help stimulate that shower and storm activity there. This is also going to probably come into play for parts of South Georgia as well, and maybe some of the Gulf states. But once we start to get that offshore flow, we're probably going to be more stable from that point and beyond until those troughs come in. So it's going to be a little bit of a touch and go situation there. I think towards the middle of this model run, towards the back half, is where things will really start to pick up there. So now that we're done with that, let's go ahead and take a quick look at our surface humidity here. And you can see that anywhere over towards the deep south, we stay relatively consistent with the humidity here. There's plenty of moisture in the air, so whenever we do get our showers and storms, at least towards the middle of the model run here, there's going to be plenty of moisture to work with in either case here. I would show the dew points, but it almost looks exactly like the temperature map, so I want to give you guys an observation that's a little bit more indicative of moisture. So we're using the relative humidities versus dew points here. If anyone wants the dew point map, I can show it to you, but I'll probably show it in another video separately, like a shorter, maybe even members only, who knows. But let's go ahead and keep things rolling, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at what the precip maps could look like. And this is where things really get exciting if you're over towards the northwest at first, because we're starting to see more notable snowfall indicators beginning to pop up here, especially as we get towards that middle part of the model run. So right about here is where we start to see most of the action begin to occur over here. Of course, I think most of this will be towards the mountains. And then the end of the model run particularly really intrigues me, because if that trough were to come into fruition, that would maybe introduce some lake effect snow, some snow for the UP as well. And maybe areas a little bit further off towards the south could really start to get going with this as well. So a lot to watch over there towards the northern states. And as we go towards the southern states, business looks like it tries to pick up as we get towards the back half of the model run, as we mentioned before. All those troughs, one of those look like they could end up doing something. 300 hours out again, not a whole lot of confidence for me to have, but here's storm number one. And this is the one that kind of intrigues me for the Midwest if the Euro scenario were to play out. But also with the deeper troughing that we have with the Euro, then we start to look at the Rockies maybe starting to get snow coming into play there, and maybe even severe weather possibly over towards the southern end of the plains and maybe even towards Dixie Alley. So it'll be the tale of two models here, but it looks like something definitely seems like it lies ahead for us here in the lower 48. So one other thing I'm going to do here, and I normally don't do this, but considering the fact that we're shifting into fall and winter, temperatures of course going to be a big talking point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the Euro here and go on pivotal weather, take a look at our temperature anomalies here, make our comparisons for above to below average. Now what I want you to pay attention to particularly is the time frame in which those troughs begin to come in, which is the 11th. Right now obviously most of us are above average, about 5 to 10 degrees, nothing of major significance. But as we get towards the end of that run, I'm going to pause it, and we're going to go all the way to the end again. Notice we're getting some numbers that are, if I can get this to work, there we go. Notice we start to have some days where we're sitting right at average or just below by about 4 or 5 degrees, potentially even over towards the eastern half of the U.S. because of that first trough that comes in. This is the time frame in which maybe you should consider getting those sweaters out. Again, it's still kind of early to latch onto this still, even at 144, but the signal at this point seems like it's starting to gain a little bit more validity, and it's worth watching. So with that in mind, I'm going to call this one a video, and I appreciate all of you tuning in. Just to let you know, we'll be covering whatever needs to be covered when the time comes, but at least in the short term, enjoy the week. It's going to be a little warm, but it won't be too bad. The departure from average is to be expected for this month, but not much. I don't think there's going to be anything of major significance. No heat waves, severe weather, to hurricanes to be expected as of right now. If anything changes, we'll be here to let you know. That being said, everyone, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.